移民生活，五味俱全，深入浅出，娓娓道来。移民生活，娓娓道来。Hi, welcome to our show, to our very first WeChat show shot in English. Alice and Jay, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having us.
Alice, you know, Jay is representing Hong Kong Canada Business Association. He's one of the board directors there, and he has extensive experience doing business, particularly in public acquisition with Chinese firms. And Alice has been working for the PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Yes, PwC.
And she now represents her two private companies doing private equity primarily. But Alice also went to the university with me, went to University of Toronto and has done some courses in philosophy before.
That's right.
She graduated from the Juris Doctors program, the JD program, and later then obtained her license to practice law in BC. And now she changed her course again in finance. So why did you change your career, so often?
Not so often. It was actually by design. So I just always been interested in business. So going to law school was to satisfy my Asian parents' aspirations for kids going to professional school. But I've always known that I would probably end up here.
Gotcha. And Jay, you've been doing business with the Chinese people for at least 10 years. How do you feel?
Yeah, well, it's been a fantastic experience for me. Have had this connection with China since I was a little boy, and was fortunate enough to travel to China over the last decade or so. It's always evolving, always changing. It's obviously coming onto the world stage in a big way, and I think that it's very important to be a part of it.
Yeah, and I think it's very good communicating with you because you are one of the few we call foreigners, but Canadians speaking English, but use WeChat, Weixin, right?
Yeah.
You're one of the few. Also, you've been to China for a dozen of times, and you know China very well. And before the show, we even talk about the 19th National Party Congress.
Yeah.
So I think is the advantage of Canadians really to have this international or global mindset, really to understand different cultures is the business advantage, particularly for China, for our ties with Asia Pacific. Would you say that?
Yeah, I would. Commenting on WeChat, I think it's a communication device or application that you have to have with me and how I interact with the Chinese community. It's something that I wish I could use the full utility of it. Hopefully that'll expand from China into the rest of the world, and I think that's a thing that will likely happen in the near future.
Yeah. And that is, why do you think it's important to do business with Chinese people? Either, speaking about foreign investment or local residents who are of Chinese descent. What's the significance of it? Why are we talking about this today, right?
Well, I think, first of all, it's because of our unique geography. So you want to make use of what attributes you've been given. So to maximize on our geographic advantage makes a lot of sense. And also China represents a huge market. So it's really huge to ignore. So I think it makes sense for people to start putting focus on.
So in terms of huge, we know that China has become the second largest economy, and it's already twice of the size of Japan's economy. And China contributes to about 33% of the total world economic growth last year. So it is a very significant force. And now China tries to unite about 65% of the world population through its One Belt, One Road policy. It's a policy of further opening up and further globalizing. Is quite the opposite of what the U.S. is doing. Now they are looking at so many bilateral relationships. They are re-examining the NAFTA, the North America Free Trade Agreement. So also because I think we have a lot of local Chinese immigrants. Ever since the early 2000s, we've seen a large influx of immigrants from mainland China. And how do you guys find the difference ever since early 2000?
Well, I think from an investment point of view, I think we have seen a little bit of evolution. So investing went from purely residential real estate to commercial real estate to development, and then to the deployment capital into buying active businesses. And now I'm starting to see a lot of the formation of private equity funds or mortgage investment corporations, so cash flow driven investment vehicles. So that tells me that our mainland Chinese friends have been growing with the market and also acquiring more sophistication in deals.
Good. And before, when I prepare for this show, I just put in Google, why BC is so good for investment or why Canada is so good. The items that come up on top are real estates investment. So everybody knows, even seminars in Singapore would tell you that the best commodity to invest in the world are real estates from Vancouver. But aside from that, Jay, what have you seen as some of the hot areas in terms of the investment for the Chinese firms?
Well, from my own experience, certainly resources, natural resources.
Natural resources.
Canada and Australia are probably the top two destinations in the world for Chinese outbound capital.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you're building an economy like China is and continue to build and develop, and then One Belt, One Road and all the initiatives, the $4 trillion in infrastructure spend, natural resources are high priority.
It's still in high demand.
That's right.
Chinese, when China just opened and people started to emigrate, and the first American cities they started to know are Los Angeles and New
San
York,
Francisco,
but now
yeah.
they started to understand there's other opportunities. There are other cities.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So same for China is a massive country with lots of opportunities. Sometimes it's often hard to just like you encourage people to go to China and see for themselves. It's hard to talk about it on the paper, but it's easier for them to experience themselves and see the magnitude of development.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So for the local economy, do you think what happened is a good thing for the local market so far?
I think it's inevitable because globalization is going to be the de facto
Unstoppable.
case. Yeah, unstoppable. It's the same for all the cities. If we look at cities like New York, like London, they are steps ahead of Vancouver. So we're just headed into the direction of becoming a true metropolitan, cosmopolitan city. So I think it's absolutely great, and I have a lot of Canadian friends that I think from Vancouver are a lot more open-minded compared to some of the other friends in other cities.
Right.
So I think being in this mix of sort of cultural collision has been great for Vancouverites. Like, we may be feeling a little bit uncomfortable right now, but over the long term, I think we'll see that this has given us a distinct advantage.
Yeah. And I think what's important is we need to understand what's going on. And really, be aware of it, right? Before we are surprised. So what do you think, Jay? What's happening so far? Is it in terms of the movement of capital and what it does to our local economic and...
Well, I definitely agree with Alice. I think that it's just a natural progression of globalization and the way things will evolve. Earlier I mentioned China IQ, so I think it's important for people to increase their knowledge and understanding, and part of that is knowing some of the history of China and its culture. In the West, children grow up seeing history and things through the lens of European history, right? And haven't had the opportunity to see things that have evolved out of China. And really, China is just going back to, in my opinion, to the great merchant nation that it was of trade around the world at a time when Columbus was coming to North America. Zhang He, Admiral Zhang He, is it? Zhang He, thank you, was sailing great ships 10 times the size of the Santa Maria through trade to Africa. So I think that's a natural evolution. I think Canada is extremely fortunate to be, if we look at the world from the top down, to be sandwiched between the two biggest economies in the world, being China and the United States, and we play a really important role.
Yeah, very good. I mean, we should really look at the reality with the lens of the history.
Yes.
So, we have a good span on history, then we have a better understanding of what's going on right now. Now, but our audience, I think, are really interested in finding out either what are the good investment opportunities here in terms of mergers or in terms of private equity, in terms of investment for their family or their assets. So maybe the two of you can give us some idea, some advice on what have been the hot areas to invest.
So from my perspective, in the last 5-6 years, there's definitely been a lot of interest in terms of deploying money into buying active businesses. By buying an active business, you have to be ready to be an operator, right? So you have to have a sufficient amount of language and also cultural understanding in order to manage your workforce,
Yes.
right? So because the business is composed of people. So that's if you want to take on the operator's challenge. If you don't want to go down that direction, then, you know, the world of real estate is, of course, open to anybody that wants to go into development, that wants to go into investing. But from, you know, my following, there's a lot of people that are now comfortable with private equity investment. So these are cash flow driven type of investments, right? So that generates, you know, a stable percentage return on the money that you invest.
Yeah.
Or even like forming your own. There's also a trend where people start to refinance real estate in order to free up the cash flow, or they collateralize insurance policies in order to take the money out and for investment. So there's a lot of different things that people can look at, and I encourage people to go to professionals in that field. So, you know, go to the real estate people if you're looking at real estate investment, but go to the finance people if you're looking for financial type of investment.
Yeah. We've also, sorry, Jay, you have something to say?
Oh, I was just going to add to that. I agree with all the opportunities that she's saying, but from a more macro level, on a sector basis, I think that Canada has a lot to offer. I think I'm seeing great opportunities in technology.
Yeah.
Canada has great innovation and technology, but perhaps lacks some of the capital required to deploy that technology.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing a lot of Chinese groups that are coming to Vancouver, setting up, partnering up with universities, encouraging entrepreneurs, taking those entrepreneurs over to China to tour them, and building that bridge.
Are
Yes.
big, eh?
Yeah,
Either
absolutely.
in China or here. Yeah.
I also think that there's great opportunities in entertainment. Vancouver being a big production hub for movies and entertainment, and a great opportunity for that cross-culture blend of production between the West and China. And then I'd also probably add to that agriculture. You know, we're blessed in this country to have fertile land. You know, despite we'd like to see the sun maybe more times in Vancouver, we're blessed with a lot of fresh water, which makes it very fertile for production. And there's obviously perhaps a growing demand in China for organic product, for product that is of a higher quality.
Absolutely.
And we're seeing a lot of that, and a lot of investment opportunities in those areas.
Yeah, you're hitting a lot of good points. We've seen a significant increase in fruits, right? Like blueberries or cherries, or you see seafood, not only agriculture but horticulture, right? You're seeing lots of agricultural products from even Saskatchewan or Manitoba, and you've seen a lot of actually business person acquiring lands there.
Yes.
And operations.
Yep.
Yeah, they just all show that actually Canada and China has very supplementary business relations.
Yes.
And both countries, you and I talked about this once before, both countries are very connected to the land, right? Canada's history of pioneers coming across and farming and living off the land, and then China's deep cultural connection and traditions with the various areas and provinces in China.
Absolutely. On top of that, we also have a very good modern history of friendship, where, you know, established by important person like Dr. Norman Bethune, or even our former Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau is one of the first to recognize China.
Absolutely.
And also, actually, our province has a long history. In 1974, our premiers led his first team to visit China, and it was a very thorough visit. He went to the northern part, the southern part, and the central part of China, all over China, to have done a very extensive tour. So I think those are all good preparations for us to really thrive in our business relationships with China. Now, focusing on investment, though, what can you advise the local residents, in terms of, if they have capital, what are the trends in investment?
Well, from my vantage point, I see a lot of private equity firms that are increasingly very open-minded about partnering with a Chinese capital partner, not only for the capital, but also for the nature of the capital, because having a Chinese capital partner opens up China as a market. I mean, the market entry into China is not something that a North American-based firm can easily accomplish, so you need to work through a Chinese contact. So I think in that sense, I'm seeing a lot of interest, a lot of very top firms that have been here that manage billions of assets under management. They're all very welcoming to this kind of progression.
I just reflect on that. I'm seeing that same openness and flexibility. I'm also seeing from the Chinese side, we talk about investment, and there used to be a trend here where the West would maybe a little bit apprehensive because the incoming Chinese investment would always want 51%.
Okay, yeah.
Right?
You won't get in control.
Right, and the difficulty that you have for that when you're the company looking for investment, when somebody comes in for 51%, they're no longer investing, they're really buying.
Taking over.
Right, so if you're wanting to buy 51%, why not 100%? But that, I think, and maybe that's a little bit what Alice is alluding to, is that we're seeing more participating investment as well.
Okay.
Where that may not be the deciding factor in the deal structure.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'm starting to see, and I'd hopefully see more of it, is that in the West we have we have cliches, and this has been sort of a modern business evolution in the West, and China's business evolution still considers a great long history. But we have sayings in the Western business culture of no such thing as a bad idea, or always encourage your frontline people, where this hierarchy in the Chinese business culture doesn't necessarily encourage that. I think there's changes, young professionals like Alice and others that can bring some of those attributes back to China, or young students that have studied here and then are returning to China. Right? Understand those values. And the reason I bring it up, and it's important, is because they come in, take an investment, and then maybe want to change the management and think, well, a CTO, I want my CTO in there, and fail to maybe recognize that, well, that CTO has been in that position for, the company's got 5 or 6 years invested. Chief Technical Officer, or a Chief Financial Officer, or the CEO. And maybe don't recognize the value of that person being in that position for 5 or 6 years that the company has invested. At the end of the day, we know and we believe that great companies are built by great management, right?
And people,
Yeah, so if you remove the management and replace them just because they are a graduate or have a CFO designation and plug them in, the business might get off track.
Totally.
Right? So it's a very, I think I've seen, and maybe like you, Alice, you can comment, I'm seeing more acceptance to that and change towards that, which is a very positive thing in my mind.
Yeah, that reminds me of a lot of companies try go into Chinese market, and they often don't realize, but quickly will realize that the most important assets are relationships, 关系, right?
Yeah.
It's often being underestimated. The importance of relationship here, but it's actually more important than we sometimes think.
Yes.
That's the kind of asset that you want, that you really don't want to lose.
That's right.
As when you acquire a company.
Well, I think people are people. And my experience is that in the West, relationship is also very important. And further to what Jay was saying, what I'm seeing is also the emergence of family offices. So the next generation business owners, right? So children that have maybe received a North American education, that's decided to stay here and operate a business through their family's aspiration. They may have acquired a local business. Okay. And so because of it's the new generation and Western education, they're more able to mesh with the existing management team. So I definitely see this kind of process, a mutual process of trying to understand each other and figuring out how to transition. But I think both populations on both sides are growing.
When you look at it, it makes a lot of sense because they're really using one stone to hit 2 or 3 birds.
Yes.
Because most immigrants, they come here is really because of their children, right? And they happen to have a large asset to deal with. So they naturally wants to invest in something that can grow for them and also provide a good future for their kids and family.
Yeah.
Very good. So also, Jay, you have been through or been on a lot of business deals. You've talked about the importance of negotiation and understanding the cultural difference. Also, I think you mentioned to me that the relationship, what's most important for a company if you wanted to grow is relationship within 100 miles or so, right? Within 100 or 200 kilometers is what you want to focus on.
Yeah, so like in the mining industry, your corporate social responsibility is really, really important. And when we had that conversation and how we related it to regular business is when you come in as a foreign entity into a country, whether it is Chinese coming into Canada or Canadian companies going into other parts of the world, you need to get the support at a very local level, right? So to use the example of mining is if you have the support of the community within 50 kilometers, that's the most important support, right? And if those people are supportive of your project and your investment, it's very hard for a government entity out in Ottawa or wherever to say, oh, well, this can't be done, when everybody at that level that it's affecting is very supportive of it.
Yeah. So this reminds me of Trump when he was doing investment in Scotland. I think he's on the golf course and said, I want that house to be gone tomorrow, but it doesn't matter, what people are telling him about the significance of it.
Right. And I have to go back to something you said earlier with the way the United States is sort of focusing inward, and the United States did not get to where they are by focusing inward.
Correct.
Globalization has expanded, and they've been very fortunate. Alice brought up geography. The United States is essentially, if you look at the economies of the world, great economies before that, like Great Britain, the thing that they had going against them was sustainability. They're an island in the North Atlantic, and it's very hard to manage all the merchant trade routes. The United States, if we put the North America in the middle of the map, is blessed. It has great ocean access on both sides, right? They dominate the Pacific, they dominate the Atlantic, and they have easy trade route to everywhere in the world. Xi Jinping understands this, and that's why he has his vision of One Belt, One Road, is because effectively China is an island right now. It only has the access to the Pacific, which is the easy part. By opening up the western side with the 3 corridors through the belt and then the ocean ways, which is pretty much established already, they get the same thing the States has, where they have open and easy flow of goods and products and services on both sides. Right?
They're strategically positioned themselves as a hub, trade hub.
So very much, in my opinion, the OBAR is a very future-forward, long-term vision that they're moving forward on in the right track. And the United States, by focusing inward, is not a track that you want to be on, in my opinion.
Now, I know you guys may not want to get into policies, neither do I, but what Alice, from your dealing with, do you dealing exclusively with Chinese clients, or do you deal with Asia Pacific or international clients in general?
Mostly clients from the Greater China region, and mostly from mainland
So
China.
what's your take on the growth of China and how we should position ourselves as a local economy in dealing with China and dealing with this?
Well, I think there's still ample of opportunities. So, for example, trade is still going to be huge. People need to eat. People want, clean water, fresh air, and, all the rest of it. So, trade is going to continue to be an advantage for Canada, right? So, our logo is, it's in our nature. And also in terms of investing, I think because of the geography, the unique geographic advantage that we do have, and there's already sort of a critical mass of people that's already here, so information flows more easily, and so that stimulates capital deployment. So I think we're still uniquely positioned, and as U.S. and Chinese policies start to have more conflict, with Donald Trump and what they're doing in the U.S., I think Canada remains to be a very politically neutral place and safe place for people, and money tends to flow to environments where things are stable.
And I think Canada should turn this uncertainty into our advantage in terms of developing or improving our multilateral relationships, including our relationship with China. Is a significant one. It's the one that we should better understand, and we should get together more often and talk about this, and hopefully share this to our audience so that they can benefit. All of us could have a better understanding, so we could push this forward and then push our society forward.
Yeah, and I'll just mention that I sit on the board of the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade, and just this year we receive funding from the government to start an offshoot of that, which is the World Trade Center Vancouver chapter. So the World Trade Center Vancouver chapter was set up to, in fact, encourage trade investment with different countries, but with a special emphasis on the Pan-Pacific countries, the Pacific Rim countries. So I think from the Canadian perspective, there has been recognition and also efforts to make that happen.
Great. All right. Thank you both. Yeah. Sorry, you have something.
Oh, I was just going to say, sorry, I was just going to say, following on that, the two sides of it, the immigration. Canada can't grow without net immigration into the country, so that has to be continued to be supported. We're fortunate that the Chinese have, graduating 30 million university students every year. Great mindset, great mind bank that can come to Canada and add value. And then, of course, as she said, the great resources of the country that are available in all the sectors that we talked about earlier.
Great. We're certainly expecting a brighter future in terms of trade. Thank you both for taking time out of your busy schedule and come on our show and talk to us in English, but we're going to have subtitle. Hopefully we will all understand, and we'll welcome you to come back on our show again.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.